What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip, Hill, Andrew, Barry, and myself, Scott McNally. Today, we are joined by IFBB Pro Nate Spear, just days out here. I think we're like a couple of weeks out now from the New York Pro. How long do we have now, Nate?
17 days. So, yeah,
17
we're getting into
days.
the days now.
Hell yeah. Guys, all of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK for additional savings. And I want to say thank you to True Nutrition for supporting us. They're the first company that actually stepped up and sponsored our programming like long ago, before we even had a ton of followers. They believe in everything we're doing. If you want to support us, shop with them. Use our code THINK. All right, we're going to get into this. If you guys haven't seen Nate, if you're like brand new to our programming, of course, we've had him on a bunch. Andrew Barry is his coach, and you guys are freaking killing it, man. I want to get into this thing. Where do we start, guys?
Well, I guess maybe the off season, because that's sort of where I think the excitement lies within, like, the change in my physique. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a different physique, I think, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize that it might be competitive, at this level, which, is a pretty big deal.
Well, yeah, let's backtrack just a little bit because, everyone always, and you did have a long amateur career, but everyone thinks that, you had this really long amateur career, but you were, really good for 4 years, just barely missing that placing, that call, whether it's at North Americans, at the second place in, was it 2020, and then the third place at Nationals. So you're always right there at the cusp, always right there, and you're improving then. But I think the biggest thing is, since you turned pro, your improvements haven't the law of diminishing returns. I really don't think that has applied to you yet, in a sense that I feel like your gains have accelerated, especially since turning pro. So I think people would want to know, A, what have you done differently, or what have we done differently? Has your mindset changed since turning pro? And yeah, just talk about those two things, really.
Oh, yeah, I definitely think for me, it was almost like a sink or swim type of situation after Boston, because for me, it was like I see so many guys that turn pro, but I don't really consider them. I consider like there's a real open IFBB pro, and then there's like guys that are just sort of sitting on the sidelines, or sort of compete here and there, but they're not really doing much. So it's like there's a big gap between that level and then people that are going into shows and that are like competitive. So for me, obviously, I knew it was sort of like, okay, I'm either gonna. I guess I felt like the pressure was on to make that jump to be. I knew I wasn't like pro level size yet, so I knew that was, I definitely felt like it was more pressure, because at the national level, I felt like it wasn't really like I was getting like out muscled by a ton, right? So I was like so close where it wasn't really the main focal point. It was just get better, but maybe not as at a quicker rate, and now it's like, okay, like I'm 36, like there's not a whole lot of, time. So I definitely felt like coming off of Boston, there was definitely like, it was like a make or break type thing. Either I'm going to have a really big off season, or I'm going to keep on putting on like 2 pounds, 3 pounds, you know what I mean? And maybe crack into the, middle second call it or something, that type of,
Can I paraphrase and you tell me if I'm right or not?
Yeah.
I think your humility is taking over. And I respect that. I understand. But it almost sounds like you're saying, I don't want to be a pro who turns pro and doesn't do anything, or sits, like you said, on the sidelines. I want to make an impact. I want to be impactful. What do I have to do to get that done as quickly as possible?
Yeah. Definitely. Okay. I would agree with that for sure. I guess there's just like it is sort of like when you say humility, I guess it's more of me like not having a whole lot of like self-confidence, right? So that's always been like a struggle for me. So I've never been the guy that's like, oh, I'm going to go into any show and like smoke everyone or win. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to put my effort forward as much as I can, but I guess I've never gone into like many shows feeling like, okay, I'm like the winner already. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I think that also too has helped me in some ways as well, because I am sort of like a realist, and I think sometimes, sometimes like you get a little bit ahead of yourself, and it can be disappointing, or you can burn yourself out because you're not really getting what you're striving for, I guess. So I always look at it as like small goals, and I think that's sort of how my whole career has been, is to sort of work my way up the ladder. So at New York, it's like I'm just sort of waiting to get in that first call out, or maybe top 3, and then go from there. You know what I mean? So sort of work your way up, and then I think I can get there at that sort of like speed, because I guess like I'm saying is like I feel like it's easy for me because I'm a low stress guy. Like I feel like I can manage all these things pretty properly, and that's because of, I guess, the way I think. Meaning like I don't get ahead of myself. So for me, like if I put the pressure on me, I have to win New York Pro. Like it's like some guys go into the pro debut, I have to win my pro debut. So for me, if I did that, I feel like that would be just detrimental to my own self. You know what I mean? So, and it would just set myself up for, I guess, disappointment. But it's not like I don't go in the show every show trying to win, I guess, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Let me throw something in there because, and I know Nate knows this. Nate knows that he has good genetics, like really good genetics, but he knows that he doesn't have like those top 1% Big Ramy genetics or Brandon Curry genetics, where if they're doing the show and it's a regular pro show, they're odds on the favorite to win the show. And I think because of that, like he's excelled his work ethic and his mindset to where some other pros that maybe are a little bit more gifted don't necessarily have that drive. Like Nate was doing his vacuums, 40 weeks out. As soon as the Boston Pro was over, he was doing his vacuum exercises, doing all these little things that were going to make him better pro a year and a half later from that point, if you get what I'm saying. So I just think there's this scale, or you got genetics, you have work ethic, you have all these, drugs, all these other factors. And I think Nate has really honed in on his work ethic. Really since 2016 when we met, and I think every year it has just continued. The dial's just been turned up a little bit more every single time.
Here's some great progress here. So that's 16, 18, 19, and then 21. What kind of weight difference are we talking there? If you can remember, Nate, stage weight from the between those shots.
Which like 220 on nationals in 2016, like 221 or something.
Yeah. And then it was like 220. 2019 was like 230, and then 21 was 240.
Okay, jeez.
Yeah, no kidding.
I have to say, I really absolutely loved the 2019 look. Just even the grainy videos when I watched the replays of it, I'm just like, wow. Yeah, it was like, I don't want to say throwback to the old days, but it just, I don't know, plus I'm also thinking of that 2019 Nationals was such a hyped event because they did a live rejudging at finals, which it never happens at these kind of shows. And the judges put them through 3-4 rounds again, and really were judging them. So just everyone in the stands was on their feet. They were cheering for their guy, whoever it would be. Nate had a lot of people in the crowd rooting for him. And it was just it was probably one of my favorite moments of bodybuilding because, you see people cheering for the Olympians when they're on stage and it's really loud, but to hear him cheering for your guy and to be in there and every muscle in my body was flexed and I was screaming. I was standing next to Nate's girlfriend Abby at the time. We were holding on to each other like if we could just squeeze a little bit harder, they're going to move them a little bit closer to the middle. It was just one of those events and those times in bodybuilding that I know I'll never forget. It's probably one of my favorites. We didn't walk away with what we were looking for, but I think that show definitely solidified Nate on the map as okay, this guy's a top 5 contender going forward every time. If he's doing a national show, be on the lookout for him. And, within 2 years, the deal was done,
And I think that was about the year we started following you, Nate, when you started coming on the shows. It was around 2019. And you've gained so many fans, on the podcast since then, just because I think people appreciate that work ethic that you have. I think, like you said, you recognize, or you guys said, you recognize that you're not the big Ramy of the crowd. So these pictures are super current. These are just from this week. What's going on right now, guys? Where are we at with this prep? What's happening at this moment? And what do you guys project you'll be doing between now and literally just a couple weeks from now to get to the stage?
Just waiting on my ass to get to the party.
Yeah. Well, so I was gonna say, like, right now we're in the final push. I foresee by the middle of next week, within the next 6 or 7 days, I think he will be quote unquote there. And then it'll just be managing his look, filling out a little bit, pulling the cardio back so that he can peak properly. I'm kind of anticipating not having to do hardly anything to peak him. Okay. At least nothing drastic. I would love to get him in shape by like next week and have, a good 10 days to just pull the cardio out down to next to nothing, pump the food up slowly like I like to do, and just be able to like catch that second wind and peak by doing that, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, like right now we're just waiting for his glutes to come in. It's funny because years ago, like his glutes would be in like 12 weeks out. And then we were just kind of waiting for some other things. And like his upper back one time was like behind his glutes, which is kind of weird, right? Yeah. Like it was, I can't remember what year, but yeah, we're just waiting for the glutes, and they're like almost there. I mean, you can see we're and don't get me wrong, a lot of pros would step on stage in this condition right now. You know, I think we see it all the time, but we've built like trademark conditioning. Nate's capable of it, and he wants to bring it with the newfound size and improvements that he's made.
Yeah, no kidding.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it's not too bad, but I mean, I would say this prep's been really smooth, but I would say now, like, my sleep's been a little rocky. It's been better as of late, but sleep's been a little off. So there's been a couple days that were like I was pretty tired, pretty drained. And then like just, I don't know about you guys, but like when I'm like 3 weeks, 4 weeks out, I start getting like I think just the recovery is not there, and you get like more soreness from training, you know what I mean? Yeah. And just from the cardio and that kind of stuff, like just being on your feet seems a little bit more of a task, right? So it's sort of getting to that point. I'm definitely super hungry, but I mean, at this point, when you're this lean, I mean, you're going to be, no matter how much food you're eating, you know what I mean? You're just sort of, everything's on robot mode, right?
Yeah, the hunger is something that's interesting. Go ahead.
Training's been really good though, as far as like my main goal this whole prep has been every leg day to have like pretty much a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 leg day, and it's been pretty much the whole way I've been having that happen. So I've been really happy about that, because obviously, my legs came up, which I'm really happy about, but also like for me, through this prep, I keep an eye on, I guess I get a little bit, not paranoid, but I just do keep an eye on my legs as far as like, how are they holding up as far as the fullness and the shape, and because now that we're dieting down, we're pushing cardio a little bit more, that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? But they seem to be holding up really well. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Andrew?
Your legs have absolutely held up perfectly. I will say this, and this is actually kind of a teaching thing for people listening. So like his cardio is probably the highest it's ever been, I think. Probably maybe one time we did like 2 45-minute sessions, but he's been on like 35 minutes for 2 sessions for a while now. And I also want to point out, so he's completely changed his career to where he's coaching, right? And I experienced this myself, to where I used to have to do like no cardio for preps because I was personal training people on my feet all day. And Nate used to be in the kitchen, managing people, managing a restaurant. It's really hard because you don't account for those calories that you burn, because you don't feel yourself burning them, right? Like it's just contributing to your basal metabolic rate and your NEAT. And so now, like, we got to do step goals, and we got to do the double cardio sessions and all that good stuff. And, but I will say that with all that, his legs have held up like just perfectly. I don't think, I don't think he's lost any of the new muscle that he put on during this prep.
Yeah, I noticed that firsthand when I went from a real physical job to just sitting on my butt working at home. What is the difference like in the food this year compared to previous preps where he had been on his feet?
It was really high, actually. Like I would say, we kept your food super high up until
even this time,
like 10 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, like and even then, it was still like on the higher end. I think even up until like 6 weeks out. I feel like it's just that we've really been pushing with it these last 2 weeks to try to get that last bit off and just seal the deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to. I don't have your file open in front of me, but I feel like at like 10 weeks out, we were still at like
almost
400
5,000.
protein. Yeah, like 5,000 calories, like 400 protein,
yeah.
like 650 or 700 on the carbs. And we even kept your
Yeah,
fats higher
crazy.
this year. Yeah, your fats were still in the 80s, I think, at that point, maybe 90.
Yeah, 85 or something.
Yeah, it's only
But no,
recently
like,
that we've really, really pulled.
I feel like though, Scott, like for that, like I still get in shape. Like that first like 15 to 20 pounds has always been very, very easy for me. Like just small food changes and it just sort of happens. But then obviously to get to that sort of next level, or, you know, once we get to like 6 weeks out, no matter what, we usually have to sort of turn it up like 3 times. You know what I mean? So it's like it gets there. It's just a shorter window for me, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you mentioned, you know, training's still been really good. Are you still doing the same kind of training you did through the off season, the training that you used to build the legs, or what's going on now?
Yeah. So I'm still doing the same exact thing. I just feel like, you know, I really held myself to that actually, because I was like, well, my legs came up so much by doing this exact same thing. I should probably just keep doing that, right? So, and I have a really good setup, like as far as like I'm really in love with this like, three on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off, and then my every leg day is after a rest day, and I felt like that's been a really, really good response as far as performance, pumps, just sort of everything is fresh and ready to work. And then a lot of our high days I would do the night before those leg days, and just obviously it'd give me some life and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So that was really nice. So for performance wise. But I definitely really love having the rest day before the leg day. I feel like that made a big difference this year too. Yeah.
What does that 3-day rotation look like?
So it's like, it's actually a little weird, but it goes quads, chest, tris, bis, back, and then off, and then hams with a little bit of quads, and then shoulders, bis, tris, and then back. And usually that other back day is more like width day, and then I do the more rowing, that kind of stuff day.
Okay. You mentioned,
but no, I like a lot of people might say I don't like push days, the general base ones, because I feel like it's just way too much for me. So with the chest and the arms, it's really not a whole lot as far as volume or too much in one day. And then same with like the delts and the arms. And I feel like for me, chest and delts like once a week is pretty good for the moment. But like I might go back and do maybe a chest rotation where I might train it twice a week, right? So it's never like cemented in there. But.
Right. You said something a while ago that really resonated with me, and it made a lot of sense. You know, a few years back, I really fell in love with push-pull legs and progressive overload. And, you know, it was just all, you know, just going as hard as I could type training, as few sets as possible. And I started realizing that there had to be something more to that. And as I was discovering the benefit of being able to add some volume into that too, you had said something, we talked about building your legs, and you had said, I recognized that as intense as I am, there's probably a little more, you know, that I'm not able to get with my all-out intensity. And that's where you found volume to be beneficial. So you started adding more volume in, and you had said back then that that was one of the big keys to improving your legs. So how does that volume look now, say like volume versus intensity?
Yeah, so I would still say it's the same. So meaning I'm not necessarily, my leg days probably aren't what they were 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm not like crippled after them, I guess, you know? So if I would like sort of describe it, it would be like, okay, I have some mild soreness from day 1 and 2, nothing over the top, you know what I mean? So I feel like it's a good pattern as far as how I can recover and just train the next one. But I am like, I would say, you know, if I was going to rate the sets, like my hard sets, 1 to 10, I mean, they're probably like an 8.5, a 9, you know, so they're still pretty hard, and pushing as much weight as I can with like the best form I can.
Yeah.
My thing with quads is like what I learned is I in my head before I go, I always tell myself, I want to make this set as hard as possible with whatever weight I'm using. You know what I'm saying? So it means slower on the negatives, maybe some pauses in the bottoms, not locking out on top, a nice, 3 seconds on the way down, 3 seconds on the way up. Just make it a little bit harder, not enough where it's like super time under tension, but it's just a little bit slower to really feel it in the muscle more. At least for me, I feel like a lot of people, when they say I can't feel something, I always tell them to go slower. And it's usually, I find, can do a lot,
You also made sure your range of motion is like as far as wide of berth as it possibly can be. I know you made that change in the last year or two.
Oh yeah, made a big difference. I feel like it really helped hit that top of the quad sweep, where it sort of attaches to the hip. So for me, it really sort of helped fill out that top part, almost like makes it thicker on the hip, almost where the quad comes in. And then obviously, I don't know, I think my VMOs just really respond very well, but those blew up. They keep just getting bigger and bigger, I think. And then my adductors came up a lot too, I feel like.
What do you mean by that when you guys are talking about range of motion? What do you guys, what do you specifically mean?
Before, I would say my range of motion was just barely at parallel. It's like just barely getting away with like being able to post it online type range of motion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
let's be fair about that though. Let's be fair about that though, because your range of motion was never bad. I've trained with you for 6 or 7 years now. It was never bad. It was never like he was never cheating reps.
Sure.
So the point I want to make is that he just figured out how to go that extra 1, maybe 2 inches on like your leg press, or basically he ditched the ego that. Because we get into progressive overload. We get into wanting to post videos and pictures of us doing massive weights and showing that improvement in the strength that we're doing. But I think he viewed it as, wait a minute, like what's going to actually improve my quads? What's going to improve my hamstrings? And one of those factors was maybe I can get an extra inch in this leg press or whatever movement it might be.
Yeah. So like even like for example, like I can make 6 plates on the leg press super hard with 20 reps, but they're full range of motion and they're a little bit slower. So like by the time I'm done, like my legs are like on fire, you know what I mean? But I don't really feel my CNS is quite as beat up, if that makes sense, or like my overall body. It's really the muscle that is just so fatigued, you know what I mean? It's sort of I think is what I'm sort of going for. But no, I think a lot of guys with weaker quads, they just have to go full range of motion. And then my issue was when I was coming up, you watch the guys on muscular development and those training videos, and they're not really doing like, I remember, some of these, Dexter Jackson and like, Sean Roden, you see them doing like, they're not really like full range of motion. You know what I mean? Those guys have incredible legs. So it sort of confuses you, and you're like, oh, well, those guys have huge legs, right? So, but I think there's like certain things that, obviously certain people can get away with. So for me, I found that if you have like weaker quads, I think really you have to go as maximal range of motion as you can, sort of like, as they say, hamstring to calf, right? But with control though, there has to be control. Like I think a lot of people ass to grass and they like, drop it down and like bounce out, whole, like that's not what we're going. This is bodybuilding, like that kind of stuff. We're going for like maximal. So what I'm trying to say is like, we want to make it maximally as hard as possible. So yes, full range of motion, but I don't want to actually let my ass touch my calves because there's that break of tension for a second. So it's going to be much harder if I stop right before that. And that's bodybuilding, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, guys, that's my objective.
This is what I meant by saying that, Nate realizing that he didn't have that top 1% genetics. Like we've all seen the videos of Phil Heath squatting where you might even call it a half or a 3/4 rep, maybe with like, and he's just bouncing up and down and his legs are massive. People like that born with that top 0.5% of the genetic population can get away with that. And what I'm trying to say is that Nate introspectively looked at his own genetics and what he could do, what paths he could take to try to come up with his shortcomings. And that's what I'm talking about by thinking like outside of the box like that.
I love that. That's cool.
Definitely. Well, I think a lot of guys too, they get in like something, whatever worked for them in the beginning, they sort of marry to it, and it's hard for them to detach from that sort of belief system or whatever, right? Like you don't really hear of a lot of guys going like, oh yeah, I did, JP or, DC training for 10 years. And then all of a sudden I was doing, 6 days, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like high volume training or whatever. I guess a lot of people are they get sort of married to one way and it might have worked for them for a while, but you know what I mean? They might, you know what I mean? Like sort of stuff obviously stops working, right? As we grow and get better and all that kind of stuff. But
I think a lot
it's
of
also
people
hard.
also,
It's hard too sometimes for people to, I have friends like this. So, and I was like this a little bit too, but it's hard to detach yourself, meaning like emotion, from training sometimes. So a lot of people have to go in there and have to train every time, balls to the wall. And that's what got them there. And that's how we do get there. All of us usually have to go through that phase, but there becomes a time and a place where you almost you want to get in tune with your training, where you know when to turn it on, when to turn it off, because that's actually, I find, optimal growth is when you're more in tune with your recovery and you know when to do it and when not to. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Because I think you have to know when, because you can't be on all the time, right? But then some guys can't go into the gym and just do like fluff stuff, you know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, like when Dusty talks about training arms, he's like, I hate training arms, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to have that balance, and you're right, man. I feel like we find something that works, be it, you know, in training or in diet or whatever, and you know, we just keep riding that. It takes a lot to be able to step back and recognize, hey, you know, what am I not looking at here? You know, what am I not getting out of this? Like we were talking about earlier with you adding more volume in. I mean, that I think was. Honestly, I think that was probably a big key for you, you know, figuring that out, figuring out range of motion, being able to get rid of the ego and being able to, I mean, I'm guessing you had to, if anything, or if at the most, you probably did have to lower some weight a little bit to get that further range.
Definitely. It was definitely, something that you have to get used to, you know what I mean? It was much harder because, you know, you add those 2 to 3 inches. I mean, that's a whole different ball game. You know what I mean?
Skip, I was waiting for that's what she said.
Yeah. Well, there's been a couple jokes about an inch here and an inch there, but I refrained.
It's too early in the day for Skip. That's what it is.
Today.
Yeah, he just woke up. I was going to say that, you know, a lot of people that are introspective about their training and, you know, they study and they think about things, they go with what makes the most sense to them and the way that their brain works, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm as guilty of this as anybody. You know, I think all of us are. Anyone that's serious about training has been doing it for 10 or 15 years. I feel like, you know, they've tried several things. They've done a lot of research. They've done tons of reading. But at the end, they're always going to go back with what makes sense to them in their mind for muscle growth, right? But I do think there's something to be said about keeping that open mind and thinking outside of the box or taking the advice from somebody else. And I think, like in this case, like Nate said, you know, adding a little bit of volume, you know, or adding that extra inch range of motion, whatever it might be. I just want to throw that out there.
It's very easy to become complacent because we do know that it works. So if you're getting 2% and you know that you can rely on 2%, then it almost seems nonsensical to go and go, well, if I take this chance and get outside, maybe I'll get 4 or 5%, when a lot of times it doesn't work. And then you end up falling back on what does work. But that's you know, what's the best stimulus? The one that your body is not used to. So to sit in that comfort zone and continue to do the same thing, likely people say, well, it doesn't work. Or after a certain amount of time, it doesn't work. It still works. It just doesn't work anywhere near as well because the body has adapted to it and gotten used to it. So then it becomes not a non-stimulus, but a less impactful one because it's predictable. The body knows what's coming and it's not likely there's no real reason for it to change.
Yeah. So who are you looking forward to competing with at New York Pro, Nate? Because I know that, you know, by the time we get to the show, the work is done. And really, I mean, of course, there's the nervousness of wanting to do your best and perform and all that. But at the same time, man, I've always felt like being able to be at the competition. It's like, I made it. I look good. I'm happy with this. Yeah. And you get to showcase it. And I know that there's a bunch of guys that are going to be there that you know.
Yeah, I'm definitely very excited, and I think it's hard to like sort of narrow it down because there's a lot of new guys, and I'm a new guy too. So we sort of came up all around the same time. I mean, between Carlos, obviously, because I competed with him at nationals and he beat me, you know, and he's just a a phenomenal bodybuilder. So it's cool to sort of stand next to him. And then with Beef Stew, you know what I mean? We sort of are friendly and talk here and there. And I think a lot of people are talking about him. And so I think he's definitely one of the favorites to sort of go into it. And then honestly, I think, who's going to shock some people, I think, is Eric Wood. He's looking pretty nuts.
I saw him in person last week.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. And then I found out Tony O'Burton's doing it, so that'll be interesting. But no, I mean, and then Brent Swanson, I'm excited to compete with him because we obviously have competed a lot together and we have a little bit of a history, so it's fun to have a little friendly rivalry.
Brent's cool. He's cool. And you guys are both really big dudes too, so it'll be cool
Brent's
to see
a really
guys.
good dude.
It'll be cool to see. And you guys are both go ahead.
Conditioning guys, you know what I mean? So we got to see who has the better conditioning that day.
That's right.
I saw him post something this morning, I think it was, where his insulin pump fell off in the middle of the night.
Dude,
his type 1 diabetic.
He's been having a whole lot of stuff happening this prep. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but he had he went into diabetic shock, I think, one time.
Oh,
and
God.
then there was another, I can't remember, he just posted something that happened too, recently. A bunch of stuff just keeps happening to him. Poor guy.
Was insulin pump fell off? He posted his morning insulin was 517 or something like that.
His morning glucose?
Glucose? His morning
Gotcha.
blood sugar was 517. He was like, I'm going to feel like crap for a while here until I can get this under control.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he gets that under control, and I'm looking forward to see him because you're right, man. He's a guy who gets absolutely peeled. It'll be awesome to see you guys together. Hey, anything else you want? Go ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like this will be a different New York Pro than the last 8 or 7 years because for all I know, we don't have Justin LR, we don't have Akeem, we don't have a lot of the New York, New Jersey guys doing it that we've traditionally see do it every year. So I think it'll be interesting. There's a lot of new blood in this one, and it's kind of the new class paving the way for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So it'll definitely be interesting.
Yeah. And I think that Nate will fit in really well there, being that it's a contest that New York always likes the really freaky dudes. If you can bring some muscle and some nasty conditioning, you're going to win the favor of the New York crowd. There's no question.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So before we went I wanted to mention your coaching, because you're not working at the restaurant anymore. You haven't been for a long time. How's coaching going? Oh
man, it's been actually amazing. So this year has been pretty loaded up. I mean, I have people in shows most weekends, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's sort of rolling now. And I just feel too, I'm sure you guys can relate to this. Obviously I'm much newer, but it's really exciting because I feel like I'm getting really good at it. You know what I mean? I can see my eyes getting better, and the more people I've worked with, it's just becoming more in tune with everything. You know what I mean? Where it's almost becoming more second nature sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting that way because I'm just getting better, I guess. So that's fun. And then I'm getting better clients, and everything is just sort of, you know what I mean? It gets, you sort of start out and you don't really have the crazy roster, right? So you sort of, it takes a little time to sort of, build up, get a couple overalls, get a pro card or two, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So sort of breaking through in that phase now. And it's exciting though, because I guess, obviously the more success you have, the more fun it is. Right. So it's been really fun that way. I guess I feel like gotten a lot of people in pretty good shape. So I guess it's, rewarding that way. You know what I mean? I guess sometimes you start out and you second guess yourself. Hey, that's a little guy, Bailey. So you sort of second guess yourself when you start out, you know what I mean? And now I feel like I'm getting more confident within myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As a coach,
it's a good place to be. And then you end up learning more about yourself, I think, in the process too, through seeing
definitely. How
others respond. You learn more about what you're good at. You know what I mean? You're like, oh man, I guess or what you're bad at. I see people that are like, man, that guy grows a lot better than I do. Or, I can get a lot leaner than this guy. You start to see your own place in it too, which I think is really good insight to have.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. You guys got anything else you want to throw in here?
I've been talking too much. I apologize.
Well, listen, I'll say this. If you guys want to reach out to Nate, what's the best way to hit you up, Nate, for coaching?
Just Instagram at Nate Spear.
Right on.
Yeah,
And
that's
you
sort of
should
my
be
main
following him
communication.
anyway, because
Yeah.
he's going to be doing the show. You guys want to see how he does. And I wish you and Andrew the best of luck with this. This is going to be freaking cool. So, Andrew, you'll have to keep us posted on how things are going, man.
Sure thing.
All right. Reach
I'm
out to...
excited.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. And reach out to Andrew, bodybraid.com. Reach out to Skip. You can go to him, teamskip.com, mcnallydiets@gmail.com. And as I mentioned, thank you for following our shows. Thank you to our Patreon people. And if you're interested in supporting our programming, go to Patreon, and you can support us through truenutrition.com, as well as supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. All right, guys, we'll see you soon.